Hi friends, my name is Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today I've got a fun project for you. If you want to sit down and watch your favorite show for a few hours, or maybe there's a new show you've heard about and you haven't had a chance to watch it and you want to binge watch it, this project is perfect. Aside from the initial cuts of the fabric of the charm packs, you can just sit down and sew this. So come along with me today and I'll show you what I did. The first thing I did was sort through my charm packs. I have lots and lots of charm packs that I cut myself. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting aside the packaged charm packs, and what I want to do is clear out these self-cut charm packs. They really don't go with anything. They don't match anything. I really don't feel like I can make a project with them without making it scrappy. I really didn't know what I was going to do with these charm packs, but I knew I wanted to use up a lot of them. I attempted to make a little sample block with little wedges. I cut off like 3 inches of a charm pack and made these little wedges, and I was thinking, well, maybe I could make a whole quilt from these wedges. That would look pretty. And then as I laid them out, I thought, well, maybe a diamond shape would look nice too. Now to make a diamond shape, I'm going to have to cut wedges opposite ways for an equal number. If you cut all the wedges the same angle diagonally across from left to right, you would not be able to make a diamond. So if you want to make the diamond shape, you're going to need to cut half of your units from left to right and the other half from right to left, as I'll show you. So what you see me doing here is stacking up a dark with a light, with a dark, with a light, and I'm making the stacks as thick as I feel like I can cut comfortably. My first step is to cut 2 inches from these 5-inch squares. My thought was maybe I could use these 2-inch strips, 2 inch by 5 inch, to make a piano key border. Next, I cut the remaining 3 inch by 5 inch section left to right diagonally on one half of these squares, and then I went right to left on the other half, and these are equal stacks. I took the top neutral, placed it on the bottom of the stack on one side. That way when I go to the sewing machine, I can just sit down and sew these together. I continued cutting 5-inch squares the same exact way until I ran out of neutrals. Now here's a look at my charm pack 5-inch square bin after, and it looks much nicer. It's not sloppy, it's manageable, and I've got them sorted by color. So I'm really happy about that. If you've never sewn wedges together before, I recommend doing a few practice runs, and here what you're going to see me doing is clipping these just to make sure. So I am moving one of the pieces about 1/4 inch past the other piece. Now when I open this up, you can see when I stitch that 1/4 inch seam, this corner is going to line up pretty well. Now once you feel comfortable, you don't even have to use clips. You can just estimate that 1/4 inch. Next up, it's time to do some binge watching. I am simply going to sew both of these stacks of rectangles that have been cut in a wedge shape. I'm going to stitch them all together, then I'm going to go to the other stack and stitch all those together and just chain piece. You may have noticed the product I'm using to separate my chains. I'll leave a link in my description to that product. I just love it. Before I did anything else with these wedges, I decided to go ahead and sew all these 2" by 5" strips together and make one long piece. The reason I did it that way, I thought if I was going to use this for some kind of border, it would be easier just to have them all put together and then I could cut it to size. Since I stacked these up when I cut them, some of them would stick together and I only needed to use my left hand to run them through the machine. I started out sewing 1 piece to 1 piece to make 2. My next step was sewing 2 pieces to 2 pieces to make 4. Then I stitched 4 pieces to 4 pieces to make 8. Now I'm going to slow it down here because when my pieces got long enough, instead of stitching individually, I could start attaching the beginning of a piece to the end of the previous piece just by flipping it around. This is going to save a few steps. When I finish with these pieces, I'll have my one long single strip. With that done, it is time to do some pressing. The first thing I did was just do these 2" by 5" strips that I sewed all together in one long, what I thought might be a border. Then I pressed my wedge rectangles flat and open, and I kept those 2 stacks separate. Up to this point, I had spent quite a bit of time. You can imagine the smaller the pieces, the more time your project is going to take. It was time to decide exactly what I was going to do. Did I want to do this diamond shape? That would require a lot of matching. I thought about making all the wedges go one way for one row and maybe the opposite way for the following row, maybe like a little zigzag kind of a pattern. As I started playing with these pieces, I realized that my personal 5" square cutting skills were not that good. Some of these are quite a bit shorter than other ones. I noticed there was quite a bit of variance in the measurements of these individual little units. And as we know, the only cure would be to individually trim each one of these wedge shapes to the exact specific size that I wanted. So sewing a couple of test pieces together to make the diamond shape, that's when I discovered that these pieces were not going to all line up, and I was going to have to go through this huge stack and trim them all down to the exact size before I could proceed with the diamond plan. Once I saw how much more work this was going to be to trim these down and how much fabric I would lose also by trimming them to all be the exact same size, I decided to go another direction. I decided I was going to sew one stack of wedge shapes end to end and make a long, long, long piece. And then I would do the exact same thing with the other stack, and then I would have some interesting non-matching tree type shapes. And the bonus is that I can continue binge watching because sewing these end to end for the entire stack doesn't take a lot of thought. Stitching these together end to end, I had to make sure my white short edge was butting up against a colored short edge. I did have to use my seam ripper a few times because I put them together the wrong way. But similar to how we did the 2" by 5" strips, I'm going to sew one piece to one piece, then I'm going to get up to 2 pieces to 2 pieces, and then continue on. Now, one little thing about stitching these together without trimming them, I had all these little dog ear corners. I went ahead and went through and trimmed all those off, and that really didn't take much time at all. Before starting to stitch my other stack end to end, I went ahead and trimmed off all those little dog ears. While doing that, I also sorted them into color families. Then when I was all done, I went ahead and sorted them out so that no 2 colors would be right next to each other. And here we go again with the second stack, sewing them end to end, one at a time, then 2 at a time, and continuing on until I had a complete strip. Next, I pressed these long strips flat. Once those 2 long strips were all pressed flat, I just decided how I was going to sew them together. Did I want the tree shape of the neutral to be on the inside, or did I want the color tree shape to be on the inside? And then I know these are not going to match up, so I'm not really worried about it. I'm just going to stitch these 2 strips together. I know that when building a scrap quilt with lots of different colors, you need some kind of a neutral to give the eye a resting place. I decided to put a lot of 2.5" white strips together, and you can see I'm sewing a diagonal line on 2 ends at a 45-degree angle from each other, and that way I can make a long strip. And I am going to, when I get this long strip made and get those seams pressed, I am going to sew this long strip alongside of my wedge strip. That is sure one long strip. Next, I took this unit of the 2 wedge strips and the 1 white strip, and I sewed that to my, what I thought originally was going to be a piano key border. I decided to make that part of my quilt. So essentially what I've done here is create one long quilt row. So I separated this into reasonable lengths for a quilt length, and then I stitched these rows together. Now when my pieces start getting really big, I use clips to hold the sections together before I take them to the sewing machine. Otherwise it just gets too bulky and it starts slipping and sliding around. So it's better to clip or pin when your quilt top gets too large. Here's a look at that quilt top before I added 2.5-inch strips to the sides. You can see that the left side is quite uneven. The right side is a little off. I did trim those up nice and straight, and then I added my 2.5-inch border to each side. I think this quilt top is interesting. I like that there are some kid-friendly fabrics in it. I think a little kid is going to have a lot of fun with this quilt. Thanks for coming along with me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.